Hi, my name is Deshaun. Uh, yeah, I've been doing Java for 20-ish years. I think it was around 1996 that I took it for a spin. Uh, yeah, I've got 4 kids. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. And if you joined us earlier, this is my 11th day as a partner solution architect with Redis Labs. I've got a certificate. And you can find me on the webs, on the interwebs, at Deshaun. I also have JDConf since 1996. I've been doing this stuff. Azure Spring Cloud is it's my new shiny thing. It's my new favorite toy. It's a managed platform that kind of takes care of all the stuff that I don't want to. Uh, I've been spending a lot of time on this architecture side of things, and I kind of like to just create code, get things out the door. For every one of those side project domains that I've got, youmakemenuts.com, I also have a Spring Boot project that I started at start.spring.io, and yeah, and it's got a project there as well. Uh, but yeah, I like to push out code. And this managed platform actually does some really cool things. I've dealt with the toil of having to build my own containers and having to patch my own containers, and I didn't like it. Uh, One of the things that I really like about this service is it kind of takes care of that for me, and it's got some really cool magic in how it can deliver those containers, those provided containers, quickly. Uh, it uses Azure Container Registry under the hood, but it's also got the Spring Cloud components that I've grown to love over the last 5 or 6 years, or maybe it's even 7 years now. But the cool thing about this service is actually supported by both Microsoft Azure and VMware. Um, I use Jupyter notebooks, and this is actually a Jupyter notebook. This is how I'm presenting my slides. One of the things that I started to do, the original plan for this talk was kind of to show, hey, I'm MVP, I'm doing this thing, it works on my laptop, and then I'm going to take it to prod, and then I'm going to fight the scale problem. But I'm starting this new job, and part of this new job is kind of like I'm drinking from the fire hose. I got to learn, and one of the things, having adopted these Jupyter notebooks, is I'm keeping track of what I've done. Like, what does it take to go from zero on my laptop to having something running in the cloud? And this is kind of the journey. So I part of being able to run these notebooks is I can actually execute code in the middle of my slide. So if you noticed a little number here jumped up each time I execute it. I kept track. That brew taps.txt, that's keeping track of the stuff that I'm installing. And I don't have to execute them, but it's just examples of I'm keeping track of everything I've done over 11 days. I got it all. I installed pip. Jupyter runs on Python, so I got some things I needed to install in order to get that working. I'm a big fan of SDK Man. And what this allows me to do is kind of jump back and forth between different versions. Maybe you still have apps that are on Java 8. Maybe you're using the adopt OpenJDK locally, but when you're pushing to Azure Spring Cloud, you might want to use the Azure version since that's what they provide. One of the other cool things that I noticed was this plethora of reference architectures. I had no idea that this existed until just a few days ago. And I'm going to use this as kind of a reference. I'm not going to deal with a CDN right now, but I did. I created a simple app. That app's going to talk to a backend service, and I can also gather some metrics out of that app. I'm getting the information I need. But I just want to point this out. I always hear about reference architectures, and I've always actually kind of looked and hoped for something that I didn't have to kind of search through GitHub. This is just a really neat reference that I wanted to point out. So I went to start.spring.io. I hope you've seen that by now. I'll jump to it. And made a simple app, right? I can give my app a name. I can choose some dependencies that I want to deploy, and it'll actually spit out an application for me. I can generate it. I get a zip file that I can install on my machine. Start.spring.io. We'll call that my MVP, as that's how I started this. But I'm going to jump into that project. I'm going to do it all from my demo. So it's, hey, and you can see that I have that SDK man installed, and it says, hey, this is the version of the JDK that you're going to use. So now that I have that installed, I can actually build my project, and I will show you what I've done. Again, it's just a simple Spring Boot app, not as glamorous as what Edson just showed, but it does bring me joy. Uh, I'm new, and what this app is doing is it's actually kind of keeping track of, hey, how many people, if you're old and you've had domains since the 90s, you remember back in the day we had that page viewed number, and that was kind of like it's kind of like uptime at the same time. That page views, how many people have come to visit your website? And that's what I was trying to do here. So I'm just starting my app. I'll do that. Run it, run it. And then I'm going to make sure, oh, I failed. Let's see what's going on. We'll try it over here. My app is running, or it's building, right? If it's building, it works. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and start it using the Spring Boot plugin. W. And I'm going to go over here and run this again. I have an instance that's up and running. Oh, this failed. Oh, it's because there's something that's already running. That's what's going on. I don't know where that is. I still have the 11-day jitters. Seven 532. Yeah, try that again. But again, all this app is trying to do is capture a request and throw it into a database. It uses a filter to capture that request. It's grabbing the information from the request, creating a page view, and saving it into a repository. I'm implementing it so it's only on the main page. I use a URL pattern, and that pattern says I don't want it to trigger for every CSS file, every JavaScript file. So it's only for the root of that page. And now, hopefully this will work. Yay. 1, 2, 3. I ran my request 3 times, and I can do that over here as well. Localhost 8080. Hey, and it's 4. All it's doing is it's that page view. That's it. But that's enough. That's enough to bring me joy. That's all I wanted to do. Simple app, store some data. And I can move on. Again, I'm using a Jupyter notebook, so I can kind of capture this. But guess what? It works on my laptop. And that's good, right? That's good enough for me. I didn't have to do a whole lot of stuff. I'll circle back. I'm actually using an H2 embedded database here uh, so that I didn't have to stand up an instance. I actually went down the path of doing test containers for this, but I didn't think that I would have enough time to kind of explain that and do the bindings in the cloud. So I did a bunch of stuff before starting this demo. Like I said, I've got these notebooks. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is kind of what a notebook normally looks like. I created my environment variables. It says, hey, this is the stuff that I want to use. I can create my resource group, create my Spring Cloud instance, but I did a bunch of stuff before I started. And that was just like you would expect your platform to provide for you. The key here is I didn't have to create any tickets. The Azure CLI, which actually just got updated yesterday, or is in the Brew repository, I noticed got updated yesterday. I have this ability to go and stand up resources in the cloud agile. I can stand them up and I can shut them down. So not only do I have like a cloud initializing script, I've also got one that does my cleanup. So I have these steps. And it's not just go and build resources and build resources. If you haven't heard yet, there's this thing called cloud sprawl. It's where we get happy and, oh, it's so easy to stand up resources that we stand up resources and we kind of forget about them. Oh, it only costs a couple of pennies an hour, so we forget about them. But at scale, those pennies add up. And I want you to now start thinking about these pipelines, or these as pipelines, these Jupyter notebooks. They are my pipelines. I don't need to have a Jenkins lab or Azure DevOps running on my desktop. I have these that I can iterate on. I can make changes in the middle and I can move forward. So I have the init scripts that kind of built everything, and then I also had the cleanup scripts. But those are the steps that I took before. My app works locally, so I'm ready to push to prod, right? YOLO. YOLO. So I've got my application. I built my application already, and this is what it looks like. All I'm doing from a command line is saying, hey, Azure Spring Cloud, I'd like to give you an instance of my application. So I'm going to jump over to the portal just to kind of give it a different view. I'll see if I can pump that font up a little bit. I'm in my Azure Spring Cloud. That Spring Cloud is a construct that I said is built up of that container registry, that Kubernetes cluster, that build service, and it's all in a nice, pretty box. I've got 3 applications deployed. I've got these applications are being bound to different services on the back end, but the one we just deployed didn't have any services bound to it yet. I can go in and I can look. There's no services. I'm still running in memory. But I also have more details. I can go back and I can take a peek. How is that application doing? I can look all my metrics because it is Spring Boot, because I did include the actuator in my application. All those metrics, all the things that Spring is providing out of the box are being consumed out of the box by Azure Spring Cloud and the metrics wrapped around it. I'm using the diagnostic settings. So there's a nice tutorial online that you can go and capture all of that information. I will share my notebooks and the code repository, as well as the slides on GitHub after. So I've got an application. The nice thing that I like about the Azure CLI is all of the feedback that I get. The CLI, it seems very intuitive. I expect things. There's kind of a consistency across the different components. Azure Spring Cloud itself is actually a extension, and so is the application insights at the moment. So when you do install the Azure CLI, you do have to install 2 extensions in order to follow this demo. The other piece that we get, I showed you the uh, metrics in the portal, but you also have that same visibility from inside the CLI. So this is where I'm happy. I'm in a good spot. Hey, I just pushed my app to production, but now it's there. I think I can grab that URL, and if you want to follow along, we can all go see it. Oh, here it is. Hey, there's 12. Um, the first time that I experienced this, hey, I did it. I pushed an app, and now it's there. It's there for you. It's there for the world. The first time that I experienced that power of the platform, it changed my life. Right? It was a big deal. I remember looking around, everybody in the workshop saying, "Do you understand what just happened?" Right? In that workshop, we were kind of going through a simple demo like this, and I didn't feel like I wanted to do just the hello world. I was working on an application, just like you are. You're probably watching me on the side and working on your application. What I want you to do is think about your application. What would it take to get your application to the world right now? How many tickets would you have to create? How many resources do you not know? How would the firewalls work? Think about what that looks like. And that's what brings me joy. Edson, that's what sparks me. That's what sparks my joy. That's what sparks joy for me. My app is in production. So I'm going to circle back. Like I said, we have 3 apps. I've got one bound to Redis, one bound to Cosmos. I'm going to show you quick what that looks like. The the idea, just like any major cloud, it's easy to go in and create those services. What I like about what I've seen so far in Azure's services is the tight integration. So right now we have this really tight integration with the MySQL database, the Cosmos DB, and Redis. Ah, surprise! That's really cool for me. And I want to show what that looks like in my init, where I create those services on the back end. I'm binding. Here it is. Like I said, all of the configurations are there. One of the things I really like is I have the ability to change the small constructs on just about every service. And that's a real, uh, yeah, it's a pleasure to use the API. But I created a config server as well. So if you're familiar with the 15-factor applications, we have this concept of, hey, I don't want to have my configurations stored in my code. I want my code to understand its environment and pull those configurations from a trusted source, a remote source, if you will. So I do have this backed by a remote service or by configs, and it's just a GitHub repository. Each one of these applications has their own uh, configs. So if I'm connecting to Cosmos, maybe I don't want to install the H2 drivers. Maybe I don't want to have the Redis store yet. So these different applications are configured with different properties. And those properties get pulled in automatically by the platform. The other part of being on the platform is the registry, the discovery. So you'll notice that each one of these applications is actually registered with the platform. They are using that Eureka client to register themselves with the platform. And that makes it so they can discover each other. Going back. So one of the other cool things, hey, I handed the platform my jar file, just like we saw Edson do. Hey, I want to scale that thing up. I want my app to be bigger. I want to handle more. It's a pretty easy command. I'll scoot back over to the portal and I can see that command. I'm scaling up. which is cool. The very, very interesting piece about the Azure Spring Cloud is saw that the maximum number of instances per Spring Cloud instance is 500. So I can spin this app up to 500 instances is the cap. So you imagine that across all of the different regions that are provided by Azure, and that gets to be a pretty big number. And the magic of Tanzu Build Service is that I can do a quick push. I can change that one layer of that cloud native build pack, and it gets distributed across the globe. So not only I don't have to manage the patching of the container, I don't have to manage those CVEs and rebuilding all the time. The platform is taking care of a lot of that for me. Big benefits so that I can focus on my code and my page views. Now, this is an H2 instance. It's in memory. This hasn't scaled up yet. There we go. Enjoy. There we go. Different instances. Magical. Different instances have different numbers because they're not synced together. So now what I want to do is bind to a Redis instance. I can see that my application does not have a binding. So let me go bind that. I'm going to go over to my init. I'm going to bind my application. Oops. Have those properties in line, and that'll come up shortly, but I can go take a look at my services. I created a small Redis instance. Now, the other cool thing here is I'm coming at a really interesting time. We are in this process of distributing Azure Redis Enterprise. This is kind of exciting for us, where we can create these Redis instances with active-active, with the multi-region setup. That is going to be in public preview within a few days. So you need to stay tuned. While that's scaling, I'll keep on going. After we scale up, we scale down. One of the nice things that I like to do, one of the nice things this allows me to do, is scale up and scale down. If you've ever had a VM with a ticket that takes 5 days, sometimes you want to hold on to that. But when you can scale up your services, your instances, and then scale them right back down, it's not such a big deal. Like I said, I can go and clean up after myself. I can keep those pennies in line. And that's important. It's important to not exceed your budget. So while that's still running, I'm just kind of walk through, hey, we're deploying, we're having issues, but I can redeploy and keep on going. I don't have to wait. I'm not blocked. Again, I have access to my logs. I have a platform, and everything's good. And I'm running out of time, so I'll wrap it up. Binding your applications in Azure Spring Cloud is pretty easy. Having a platform to use is pretty exciting. It brings me joy. If you haven't had a chance yet, I highly recommend that you go take it for a spin. I think if you're lucky, you can, first-time users get a bucket of money to spend. I think you get 30 days to spend, some number. So you should go take a look. Azure Spring Cloud on Azure. It's the bee's knees. That's all I've got. I will share my URLs. I'll go back here and I will put everything up here after.
All right. That's it, Deshaun. Thank you so much.
Bruno,
Can we
thank
bring
you.
his? Yeah, can we? Hey, Cameron, can we bring his screen, please? So GitHub/Deshaun JDConf 2020. So you can get
Yeah,
all the resources from this organization. It's funny, you created an organization just for the conference. That's awesome.
I did because typically I'm kind of doing the last minute, and I want you to get all the goodness. And it's nice to kind of have that snapshot, like, hey, here's what it was. And like I said, I'm a big
Okay,
fan of the Jupyter notebooks. I like to put those slides up there, and I'll just dump everything in there, and it's just one stop. You don't have to search.
that's sweet. And it's also accessible, right?
Accessible, yes,
As we
right.
learned.
Yeah,
Um,
you notice I took out all my pictures, but what I didn't see was the way to turn on uh, the captioning. I didn't
so
know how to do that.
the this video will be available on YouTube, and on YouTube it has a live caption feature. So everybody who's watching and they want to see the caption or they want to enable text to speech, YouTube supports that. So don't worry, it's covered.